Morning, everyone. Thank you all for making your way in. We're running a little bit behind schedule, but what conference doesn't? Before we get Brian onto the stage, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country. So I respectfully acknowledge the people of the Yugambeh language region, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I would particularly like to acknowledge my wife and her family, who are descendants of this land, and thank them for all they have taught me about their culture and extend my respect to any First Nations people here today. A little bit about me. I'll be the MC in this room for the next 2 days. I'm the head of corporate security at SEEK, and I'm also one of the organisers of B-Sides Melbourne, as well as the Sunshine Coast's premier conference, TUSCON, which runs once a year. It's a little camping conference. There's a Q&A app, so if you want to download it, it's called Events Air. We'll be using that for Q&A today as well. But if you do have any questions, I'll be around the room, so help me get my steps up today by running around with the microphone. Just for those people that are tuning in on the stream, they may not be able to hear you unless your voice is really loud and comes here. That's why we have this. Without further ado, I'll bring Brian Hay up onto the stage. I'm going to be talking through leadership through chaos. So Brian Hay has a rare blend of cybersecurity skills and business attributes. Long considered a thought leader in the world of cybersecurity, he learned his craft not from the technical demands of the industry, but rather by focusing on the activities of organised crime and cyber criminals through a 35-year career in law enforcement. His talk is going to talk us today through exploring the concept of leadership and chaos, and whilst utilising a light touch of COVID nostalgia to demonstrate the argument, extrapolate the simple principles of what the CISO and security manager face every day. Can we give a very warm round of applause to Brian Hay?
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I think this should have kicked in. Look, thanks very much for your time. It's always, I consider, a privilege and an honour that you take the time out of your schedule to share it with me, so I hope I won't disappoint. Leadership and chaos. Well, it's been a crazy world for the last couple of years without question. And leadership, well, that's a question mark, isn't it? And it's really, I want to explore today that the notion that leadership means different things to different people, and sometimes it gets a bit confusing. Chaos, well, is it a new phenomenon or has it been with us a long time? It's all a matter of perspective. So I might challenge, and I'm no expert on leadership, and I'm not professing to be a leader, but I think there are lessons in all of us for everyone, and I'll share a couple of things with you. And as we go forward, by all means interact, ask a question through the process. Don't wait for me to finish at the end, because I'm going to try and catch up some time because things have gone over this morning, but we'll see how we go.
This is National 9 News with Mike London. Ford.
Dramatic arrest as a gunman opens fire in the city heart.
Spectacular Gold Coast blaze destroys a depot full of buses.
Matthew Hayden picked to tour South Africa. Good evening. Dramatic pictures tonight of an arrest at gunpoint in the Queen Street Mall. It came after a man was shot during a robbery at the Playtime amusement arcade. Quick action by a police sergeant prevented a suspect escaping. The action captured on the mall security video.
The 27-year-old duty manager was left for dead after being shot 4 times, then forced to open a safe. With the security camera tracking the gunman, a police sergeant gave chase, gun drawn. The suspect tried to escape in a taxi.
My door opened and sound said, go, 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 go. And when I turn my head, at the same time is my right side door is open. And I saw the one police officer with his gun, and he asked him, don't touch, don't move anything.
The terrified cabbie was moved out of the line of fire.
I had cause to draw my gun. That person got into a yellow taxi, and I was able to prevent the taxi from leaving.
Within a few minutes, Sergeant Hay was joined by other police who dragged a bag, a gun and the suspect from the car. The sergeant emptied the man's .22 caliber rifle while he was being searched. Several other weapons were found. The man was taken away for questioning. While the man was being detained, other officers tended to the wounded attendant. He'd been shot once in the chest, twice in the legs and once in the buttocks.
Sergeant Hay is likely to be recommended for a bravery award, but he says his first thoughts this morning were for the safety of the people in the street.
Yeah, I think I'm more shaken now after it's over than at the time. Yeah.
You probably risk your own life too. Have you thought about that?
That's probably why I'm shaking after it.
A 21
So I know I looked a bit different now to then, right? So I wasn't always this felt figure. I was a little bit slimmer and a little bit, had more colour in the hair, and not this ash blonde that you see before you today. But was that leadership? To go and after, what a dickhead was I to go chase someone with a gun? No, crazy. But sometimes you just don't think, and that's where training and incident response comes in, because that was not leadership. I was acting purely alone, okay? With the absence of others, it can't be leadership. And so that to me was absolutely incident response. And we actually have these chaotic events thrust upon us from time to time, and we have to deal with it. And we hope that the training, the skills that we have, the way we approach such challenges, we can actually make the right decisions at the time. And you never know, that was just a bizarre, who would have thought 6:30 a.m, Queen Street Mall, Monday morning, you're going to be confronted with a situation like that. And I can tell you, and I never want to experience it again, but when that adrenaline is pumping through your mind, the speed at which your brain operates is phenomenal. And when you talk to anyone that's had that massive adrenaline dump, and I've only had to speak to a couple of people, but it affects everyone physiologically quite different. I couldn't taste anything for about 8 hours. It was quite bizarre. And you know, when I still look at it now, I was the father of 2 young small boys. I shit myself still, but it's crazy. But you know, chaos can strike at any time. Another example, I was performing duty as a junior officer at, I think it was the 1986 Rugby League Grand Final. Wayne Bennett was the coach of Souths. Wally Lewis was the captain coach of Wynnum. And it was a grand final. And can I just point out to you young people today that streaking onto football pitches and the like is not a new phenomenon. So the South supporter decided his team was behind and he wanted to give it to the Manly supporters. So he went and jumps onto the pitch, pulls down his strides and bears the cheeks of his clacker to the audience of the opposite fans. I'm standing there in uniform, I expected to do something. This was all captured by the photographer at the Courier Mail. And it's about, you know, how do you think of issues? So he's dropped his strides and I come on board, so he starts to run and he's still got his pants down. Now I used to play a bit of footy, so normally you would just go diving tackle. Now if I did a diving tackle to his legs to take him down, there is a risk my nose is going to go fair up his clacker. That was not a risk I was prepared to take. I had to take action. So I had to do a different sort of tackling technique and ground me around the waist, keep my arms stiff, and ultimately take him to the ground. The hat goes flying in the air, but I'd like, for the benefit, notice that I never lost my sunglasses at any time. So he goes down, then my mate comes over and he walks away. Now, one of these things, whenever you have chaos, is always treat people with respect. And I must say, the Courier Mail thought it was quite a humorous event the next day as well. But the point was, here I was, we had a laugh about it with this guy. He apologised, he got a $10 fine, no conviction recorded, so it was all good. And why I say you always treat people well no matter what you are and what you were doing. I remember once we had this scumbag piece of crap called Dennis Raymond Ferguson. We caught him with 3 pedophiles, he's a pedophile, with another guy called Alexandra George Brooks, caught him with 3 little kiddies in a room in Hamilton many years ago. Now, not the most pleasant person you'd ever want to meet, but I made sure I treated him extraordinarily well. Because what I wanted to achieve was the outcome where he had incarceration in prison for a very long time. So I was never going to let my emotions get the better of me to put that conviction, that penalty in jeopardy, and that happened. And so, but this guy here, I'm standing the next year on the hill at Lang Park, it was at Lang Park then, watching a State of Origin game, and this 2 heads down, this head turns around and he looks at me. And he swivels back around. I thought, I know you. He said, yeah, I know you. And we had a laugh about it. And no matter what trials and tribulations you face, if you can always maintain a sense of humour, maintain your dignity and respect for the other people that you're dealing with, life will always be better for it. Because we are going to have chaotic events. And chaos will continue to reign and fall. Now, I am no Sheldon Cooper. I'm not going to sit here and talk about chaos theory and string theory. I'm not that smart. Okay, I'm a burnout fraud and cybercrime detective. But what I will tell you, there is supposed to be some pattern to chaos, and in actual fact, when you go through it enough, there are things you can develop to make it easier to manage as time goes on. And talk about that a bit later. But it seems to be, once upon a time we used to get into this routine. We would have highs and lows. Now it just seems to be crazy, and that's because the external environment is affecting the internal and everything is changing so rapidly. Sometimes driven by technology, sometimes by other world events. Sometimes things like COVID-19, we had to do a massive rollout, as you know, remote workers right across the nation. And then of course we had things like what we've got at the moment, the Ukraine-Russian conflict. Now in Australia we tend to have a little bit of apathy. We're in a big continent. We think we're the centre of the universe. The reality is we're just a bit player on the world stage, and these things will affect us. And we're not probably given enough thought to how's it going to affect us in 6 months and 12 months, because there will be repercussions for this that we're not understanding at the moment. So is chaos the new norm? Okay? I remember 10 years ago saying chaos was the new norm, and everything is accelerated in a factor of 10 since then. And the new norm, and when I talk about chaos, is how do you survive? How do you go from treading water to actually, and then occasionally the eyes and the nose dips below the surface of the water and you get back up again and you keep struggling. You know, who would have thought that here in Queensland we would have locked out our own citizens and prevented them from getting home for months on end? Who would have thought that crime would have been running rampant on the street, but locking out our borders was considered more important? And when, you know, everything of the events of COVID-19 will be studied by academics for decades. It's very unique. Did our leaders, and I use the term loosely, show leadership, or were they following the norm? What was their priority? What was the big outcome they were trying to seek? Was it communicated effectively? Whatever it is, I'm not judging right or wrong, but these are questions we should ask for what are the lessons we can take from it ourselves. Now I'm going to tell you, leadership is rarer than we think it is. We make this mistake by thinking that people in senior positions are all leaders. They're all expected to be leaders, but I'm going to argue that leadership is actually quite a rare phenomenon. I'm saying a lot of people have leadership. In fact, every one of you people in the room do possess leadership qualities. Will that translate to be the leader of an organisation or a leader of a business unit or a leader of 2 people? I don't know, but I'd suggest to you, you all have it within you to be leaders depending on what you desire. And that's what I'm going to do today is talk about how you can challenge yourself, to reflect upon yourselves to be better people and consequently better leaders. And stop putting leaders on pillars and mantelpieces. Just people, okay? And they don't always get it right. Now, here's a slide which fundamentally it looks like that's not me, that's it there. Guidance, solution, goal, motivation, communication, plan, vision, direction. Can I just call bullshit for a moment? Okay? When we start to provide a textbook script about what leaders should do, we're starting to make mistakes. Because if you actually look at the leadership theory, look at all these types of leaders. There's democratic, autocratic, laissez-faire, strategic, transformational, transactional, coach style, bureaucratic. Which one do you want to be? Crap. Focus on just being a good person and the leadership processes will evolve, right? I remember once saying to one of the chief executives in NTT, or it was Dimension Data when I was there, and I said, you know what? I said, Dimension Data is a bureaucracy. And he was horrified and he looked at me, he said, what do you mean? He was quite offended. I said, you know when you're working in a bureaucracy, when the process is more important than the outcome. You imagine people, I'm sure you've met it if you've worked in large, especially if you've worked in the public sector, sit there, grab that bit of paper, stamp it in the top right corner, move that bit of paper over that bit of paper, wait for someone else to give up that bit of paper so they can grab and put their stamp on that bit of paper. Are they thinking about the big picture? Are they part of a team that's making a meaningful difference? Or are they just performing a process? Did they lack leadership? Or were they subject of zero leadership? It makes for interesting debate. But one of the fundamental keys for me is leadership. And what distinguishes leadership from, say, management, which I'll touch on shortly, is that leaders strive to make a difference. Ideally, they strive to make something better. Now, I don't care if they made it better or not. What I care about is they gave it a crack to make a difference. Okay? I would get all of my new staff in. When I came to the fraud and cybercrime group, I'd put them down. I'd say, okay, let's establish some ground rules. This is what I think. This is the vision. Where do you want to be in 3 years, 5 years, 7 years? Sometimes I didn't know. I said, what's your career aspirations? I said, I've got you for a short time. And my job is to maximise the benefits to you whilst you're here, and my job is to work for you. So how can I help you get promoted? And I would talk about, and they would say, bring me your applications when you want to go for promotion. And I would tell them, do not bring me an application that says all this highfalutin, philanthropic buzzword crap. Give me a litany of the demonstrated areas and evidence where you made a difference, because the rest will take care of itself. So that's what I would do. Set the expectations, understand. And I said, I will never, ever have a go at you for making a mistake. If you made the same mistake 3 times, we might have to have a conversation. But fundamentally, I will always support you if you made a mistake. But I will have a crack at you if you don't do anything. So it's all about actions, and it's about inspiring and coaching and nurturing other people, not so much about yourself. You know, this guy says leadership is about change, and then he talks about inspiration. If you want to be a leader, think about change. If you want to be a manager, and let me just say, managers are vital to leaders. Not everyone can be at the top of the totem pole. When you look at our team of huskies and there's 10 dogs running, it's only the front 1 or 2 that actually see the horizon. The rest, all they see is the other dog's butts in front of them, okay? But they're incredible, because without those people doing the grunt work, those people are useless at the front because they can't go anywhere. So think about how you change, because I'm going to say to you, if you're not changing, you're not leading, and that is business as usual. Okay, that's a management role. And leadership is all about actions, not position. How many people have been in more senior positions than you, and you're dead set, they've got their head up their arse most of the time and have no idea what's going on? They lack the skills, the understanding, the appreciation of the environment, and do they make a positive quality difference to your life and that life of the organisation? In the public sector, you may have heard of the Peter Principle, and trust me, it is living, thriving and strong. The Peter Principle is you promote people to get rid of them into higher positions beyond their level of competence. And sadly, it should never happen, but it does. And I'm sure you've all seen leaders put into positions, I shouldn't call them leaders, people put into those positions expecting to be leaders that are completely incompetent for the role and task. So, leadership is not a position. It is not about being popular. We get this notion sometimes that a good leader is someone that everyone loves. Absolutely not. Because you have to make decisions that not everyone will agree with. And in times of chaos, more importantly, they're thinking, what the hell are they making that decision for? That's ridiculous. Let's form a committee. Okay? And sometimes you simply don't have the time. And apologies, ladies, I didn't construct that slide. I unashamedly stole it. And so it's not a one-man show, but a one-person show. One person, no leadership. Team of people, now there's an opportunity. And the other thing, accept responsibility and accountability for your actions. And be as humble with yourself as you are with the team. Okay, as I said before, I'll never have a go at anyone for making a mistake. And forgive yourself, because sometimes I've seen leaders beat themselves up because they got it wrong. It was proven later. So what? Did the world stop? No. Was an opportunity to learn? Absolutely. And another critical thing through when you're dealing with these chaotic, crazy events and you're trying to find the way forward is understand the perception of others, of the team, the internal, the external. Can I just ask people in the room, for example, can you put up your hand, that shoe, is it, let's call it a teal green edge with grey on a grey shoe? Who says that? Okay. Put up your hand if you see a green teal edged shoe that is pink. Yeah. Okay. Normally I get closer to 50-50. Here it's about 90-10. But the perception by some is that is a pink shoe. And they will argue black and blue, that is a pink shoe. And others will say, what are you talking about, you dipshit? It's a green shoe. It's a grey shoe. Sometimes perception is reality. You know, we go into organisations and we do these things called cultural diagnostics to understand perceptions, beliefs, attitudes, behavioural norms, and you have to take that all into account. The world is not black and white. We have so many people with different diverse backgrounds, which is fantastic, and we see and bring a character. If we can homogenise that view of the world, then we can have a whole new landscape of opportunity. So understand, just because you say it so doesn't mean people will believe it to be true. And sometimes first of all, scan the environment to understand the fundamental perceptions, and then manage that the way you need to further have a chance of success. Now, I said it before, you know, I'm not going to call them bad leaders, I'll say bad people in positions of potential leadership. We're all going to encounter them, but can I just say, those people, and you see when someone goes into an organisation and everyone leaves, you've got a problem. Can I just say, you can learn just as much from a bad leader or a person in authority doing the wrong thing, and I don't mean corrupt wrong thing, I've just been incompetent, as you can from a quality leader. In fact, you can learn more, because when we have and work for a good leader, we really appreciate it. But what happens, human nature, is we start to take it for granted, and we forget how wonderful these people are and how they really work hard for us. But with someone not so competent, it's right there in your face. But what that also presents then is an opportunity for you to stand up and show your leadership to actually, dare I say, help them and fill some of the voids and the challenges that will be ensuing after people leave. Okay? So every moment is a learning moment. Click, click. Here we go. What is management? So just for the difference, planning, leading, organising, administering or controlling. Now you notice it has an element of leadership in it. But managers fundamentally aren't leaders, but some good managers do have some good leadership attributes. And there's no reason you cannot be both. But generally, as I said before, leadership is change and taking people on the journey. Management is getting the business as usual done. And we all need good managers. And if you're happy to be a manager and not a leader, a manager with good leadership traits, fantastic. One is not, I'm not saying here one is better than the other. But what I do challenge you to think is, what do you want to be? And understand the basic parameters of their behaviours and the qualities that you need to do it well. So I'm going to say to you, the two attributes of leadership we need to focus on is change, making a difference, and people. If you're not embracing people, you're not being a leader. And can I tell you, in times of chaos, your people need leadership and direction more than ever before. They don't need someone to be perfect. That's not us, it's not them. But they do need people that are prepared to take on the challenge at hand. And where I see it often in the IT world, where the people side isn't considered, I call it implementation versus installation. In this case on the slide, installation versus implementation. Installation, you can hook up the software, you can hook up the hardware, and you can actually put a new piece of technical kit on board. But if you haven't taken people in the organisation on the journey and appraised them of it, got their support, their feedback, done some focus groups, you may not get implementation. I was talking to one person from university in Victoria a couple of years ago, and they were frustrated. They spent millions on this tech rollout. It was adopted and used by 8% of the university because they never involved people in the process and gave them the heads up. So think about the human element more regularly. The other thing, little myth I'd like to challenge is that we tend to think that leadership should come from the top down. Absolutely not. Encourage leadership attributes from the bottom up as well, simultaneously. You know, it's not an ego thing. It's about what is the difference we can collectively make by working effectively as a team together, and ideally the leader has set the vision. And people understand. Then with that vision to achieve it, they've set the values, the beliefs. So we understand what's right and wrong, what's in parameter, what is not in parameter, and how we're going to collectively can assimilate to make a difference. But please don't think that if you're the top of the organisation, you have to make all the decisions. That's nuts. There's too much going on, especially with times of chaos. You need decision-making support. You need to get the information, and you need your people to work as a collegiate team. Now, for everything that I've said, and all the world thinks it's for the first time has experienced this chaos, especially here in Australia, are you shitting me? You people in the cybersecurity community have been dealing with chaos for over a decade. And my hat goes off, you're my champions. You deal with this every single day to a scale that most other people in your organisation have no idea about. No idea whatsoever. And I started putting this slide on an exploding head, and I started putting just some of the things that's thrown at you all today: vendor management, zero trust, compliance, digital transformation, expanding digital footprint, intelligence resources, penetration tests, technology updates, incident response, budget battles, phishing defence, emerging technologies, emerging legislation, business metrics and reporting, security in depth, ever-changing, evolving adversary, and that's on the outside, and it's nuts, right? I've got more here: risk and vulnerability assessments, managing the team. Oh my God, how do you have time to draw breath in a day? What you people do is extraordinary. And you're showing leadership and extraordinary management capabilities every single day, but sometimes you just don't realise it. The simple reality is you've been managing chaos pretty much since day one. And people don't understand it because you're doing it quietly and competently, and quite too often, sometimes with not enough support. Maybe that needs to be vocalised a bit more down the track. So when you say about leadership through chaos, you are demonstrating it. Well, certainly managing through chaos to a level. But I think if you look within yourselves, there's an opportunity to take it to one higher step. So at the moment, I'd suggest you're probably in a position where a lot of what you do is reactive. Okay? Now, if you're in a reactive state, that's a management state. And you might be, and I'm not saying management is bad, please understand. But if it's in a reactive state you're managing, what I want you to start thinking about, how can you make it proactive? How do you actually take a step back sometimes from the crap to give an overarching perspective on what is happening? And then start to provide some predictive analysis of where do you think it's going to go next. And if you can start to predict where it might go next, now you move into a proactive state. Now to do that, you're going to initiate change. Now to be effective there, you're now demonstrating leadership qualities. And the other thing I want to challenge you from is move away from thinking your only role is to protect the vertical IT stack, or maybe in the cloud or wherever. Okay, start thinking. To me, good cybersecurity is about driving business outcomes, reducing risk and growing people. The technology is an element of that. And where I see great opportunity in this industry is to permeate your skills laterally across the business. I say to people, I say, what is your aspiration, your career aspiration? And they may say, I want to be a security manager, I want to be a CISO. Some, not many, say CIO. My challenge to you is, why are you not thinking about becoming the CEO? In this room are some of the most intelligent people I've ever met, with the greatest capabilities, with a great empathy for people. And the only thing holding you back sometimes is the way you perceive yourself. So I would challenge you to look at how you can add value laterally, okay? Because you deserve a seat at the board table. You have too much talent to let the world put you in a shoebox. But the reality is, the world is not putting you in a shoebox. Too many people are putting themselves in that shoebox. So it might be time, folks, to break out. Now, one tip I'd give you, if you're going to break out, please develop skills around the English language. Bear with me. So when I first arrived at the FCCG, I had Peter Kingsley came and saw me. Peter headed up our digital forensics team. And Peter came in, I said, Pete, I'd like to know what you do, how I can help you. And he came and he was talking for about 3 minutes. So I said, Pete, do you mind doing me a favour? He said, yeah, boss, what's that? I said, can you go outside the door and come back in and talk English? And we had a laugh, right? He said, sorry, boss, they call us dolphins. I said, dolphins? He said, yeah, we're highly intelligent, but don't speak English. And we developed our own language. And by the end of it, we had grown the largest digital forensics practice in the country. We need to start understanding the language of business and the language of risk and the language of the board, okay? Not just the tech environments. Failure, don't be afraid of it. Failure is another step towards success. As Thomas Edison said, he hasn't failed, he's just tried 10,000 different ways that didn't work. And that's a step towards success. So please don't ever be worried about failure. Now, I remember once hearing a very senior police leader saying, who didn't want to take on a new project, because he made this comment about, you know, what happened to pioneers, they all died from arrows in the back. If you are a leader and you are making changes, there is every chance you are going to be targeted, without question. Jealousy is a curse. Your peers will feel inferior, and sometimes human nature, they will strike out. Trust me, I've been there. But it's just part of the game, okay? Therein, one of the other characteristics you need to be a leader is to be resilient. Life isn't fair and you can't control other people, but there are steps to try and manage and mitigate that risk. So some final steps about leading through chaos, okay? Maintain always a calm and steady hand no matter how crazy the situation is. Never lose sight of the big picture of what it's all about. Set your vision, values and beliefs. I'm happy to make these slides available if anyone wants them, except for that video clip at the front. Always maintain a positive nature and always have empathy for your people. You've got to be people focused. Accept change as the normative value. Okay, BAU is good for maintaining, for leading, it's got to be change. And most critical is always explain the why behind the change to your people. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Okay, now I think that would just about take my time. I've got 60 seconds left. The theme of this conference, how often should you reflect? I reflect every single day. I had to do this as a professional executive leadership program years ago, a decade ago, down at Manly with Charles Sturt Uni. And they challenged us to write a journal about reflecting our thoughts. Now, getting a bunch of, 30, 40-year veteran coppers to, get all emotional on paper and the way they view things was not an easy task. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm still struggling with it. And they promised us only one person would read it. So I said, stuff it. And I did it, and it spewed it out, and it's changed my life to a large extent. I would encourage you to think about the way you deal with difficult situations every single day and what are the learning elements from it. Then rethink regularly. Are you on the right path? Don't commit something that's 3 years down the track that's really after 6 months knows that something's not right. Rethink regularly. Reskill, never ever stop investing in your people and never stop investing in yourself. You're worth it. Reboot as necessary. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I hope that gave you some insight. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you for absorbing some of the time as well.
Oh, it's all right.
Now, looking at the Q&A app, we only have one question as some issues are in the virtual world, so it's nothing to do with the presentation itself, just the fact that people online couldn't see it. So hopefully that chaos is sorted now. Are there any questions around the room? I have a few minutes. Oh, one over here. Excellent. I get some steps.
Thank you, Brian. My question, you've talked about chaos and leadership today. So my question is crisis versus chaos. And in your 33 years of experience, what consistent attributes and qualities have you seen in leaders in times of crisis? And I mean crisis as distinct from chaos. So bushfires, wars, things like that. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'd say that chaos can control moments of crises. A crisis is you want clarity. Normally it's an operational role that's, quite frankly, certainly in what I've seen as law enforcement, we've actually got most bases covered, whether a crisis from a loss of life, a horrific industrial accident, as you said, a bushfire, a major manhunt. So crises is about normally, and it's like an incident response on a larger scale. You've got processes in place, you have a command and control centre that you default to, and you actually fall into the process that is established. It's very particularised, and you follow it almost fluently and automatically. With chaos, often I would say it sits outside the normal realm of response, where you've got to innovate and change, and you may have 6 crises events to deal simultaneously with now 10% of your staff workload. So you've got to be very creative. I hope that makes sense. And as for the attributes, ability to change and be flexible and prioritise on the fly, and it's about very quickly forming a quality team with you to be able to achieve it.
Thank you. Great question. Any other questions? Probably have time for one quick more. Alrighty.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. We'll give a warm round of applause for Brian Hay.
Thank you.